Good afternoon, America, and all of you who may be listening, not only in America, but also throughout this lovely world. It is November 29th, 2021. The new WCEG Network welcomes you. This program is Issues and Answers, and I am your host, Norman A. Carter Jr. On your computer or smartphone, you can view or hear us by typing in WCEG talkradio.com in your browser and then hit enter. And on the next screen, click the live stream tab. On your smart TV, you can just go to the YouTube icon on your television and search for WCEG Network. Scroll down to Issues and Answers, and bingo, I'm right there. WCEG stands for Worldwide Community Empowerment Group. Our programming goal is to leave you more informed and more empowered than you were before you tuned in. Our motto, we speak life into the community. You may like us on Facebook and view us live there, and also send in your questions and comments. I'd just like to say that the topics and opinions on Issues and Answers are those of me, Norman A. Carter Jr., and my guest today, Mr. Jose Morales, and not the WCEG Network. So leave my boss alone. This is my show, and these are my words and the words of my guest. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our guest. Before I get into our program, I'd like to reacquaint my audience with my personal background as it is relevant to this program and my sincere interest in the topic. I did spend 25 years as a Philadelphia police officer and nearly 5 years as an investigative supervisor for the Philadelphia Regional Office of Pennsylvania's Office of Inspector General. Both during and after my career in law enforcement, I was and have remained active in instituting police reforms. If you read my autobiography, The Long Blue Walk, My Journey as a Philly Cop, you will find that I was very successful in 2 policy changes, one of which I initiated. These changes had both local and national impact. Now, I grew up in a neighborhood where far too many of my acquaintances served time in prisons. From them, I learned of some of the horrible living conditions and social adjustments one must make in order to survive in prison. It was not until I reached adulthood that departments of prisons became euphemistically known as departments of corrections. The title change should mean something. Society has a right to punish those who refuse to follow its laws. It also has the responsibility to give every prisoner the opportunity to correct the behavioral tendencies that led them to imprisonment. Our correction system must provide an atmosphere conducive to rehabilitation. Otherwise, these men and women become trapped on a treadmill of violation and incarceration. When incarcerated people are treated inhumanely, that incarceration becomes a festering ground for mental illness, sexual assaults, sociopathic indoctrination, suicide, and murder. Our guest hosts today are here to give us insight into living and rehabilitative conditions in prisons. Hopefully, we will begin changes to improve the ways we treat people we punish and develop a system that encourages those who are incarcerated to become productive citizens. On today's installment of Issues and Answers, we have another stellar guest, Mr. Jose Morales. Mr. Morales, welcome to Issues and Answers.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon. I'd like to give the folks a snippet of your background.
Sure.
Mr. Morales is a retired Department of Corrections warden. He joined the Department of Corrections in 1999 as a correctional officer and transfer sergeant at Rutledge State Prison. In 2001, he was promoted to public safety training instructor at Macon State Prison. He was then transferred in 2004 to the Southwest Georgia Corrections Academy at Lee State Prison, where he served as training major. He was promoted in 2006 to assistant superintendent at Western Pre-Release Center. He was transferred to Calhoun State Prison, where he served as deputy warden of security. In 2010, he was promoted to warden at Johnson State Prison. In 2013, he was reassigned to Calhoun State Prison, which housed 1,633 inmates, and he had a staff of 267. He is a retired U.S. Army Airborne Infantry with more than 23 years of honorable service. He holds a criminal justice certificate from Columbus State University. He has completed training in basic correctional officer training, basic management training, Corrections Leadership Institute, post-it, firearms instructor, hostage negotiator, pre-command professional management program, senior training instructor, and crisis negotiations. Mr. Morales, welcome to our program.
My pleasure and my honor.
We'd like to get into start out with a few questions. I'd like to really can turn into a conversation. What do you, to start off with, what do you think are the most pressing needs within our prison systems in Georgia?
Well, number one is fair treatment of all offenders. That is my number one priority. If you treat inmates with dignity and respect, in turn, most likely you're going to be receiving the same respect. In prison, it's all about respect. Secondly, we have a crisis with short staff. Without the proper staff, then that is when it leads to violence, because there's no one to manage all of the inmates in every dormitory. When you have 27 priority one posts inside a typical facility, and then only 5 people show up, that's a major issue. And it's because they don't feel safe, they don't feel appreciated. And that's one of the things I'm going to work on is recruitment and retention and recognizing them for their hard work. Correctional officers don't get a lot of accolades. They're not seen as real law enforcement in the community, both law enforcement and civilian. But I can tell you, they show up for work every single day that they're scheduled, and they're hardworking. And for that, they need to be recognized. They need to be treated with dignity and respect. They also don't receive a big paycheck. And mostly because they do it out of wanting to make a difference in protecting the lives of inmates and the public. So if we recognize them for their hard work, I believe their behavior will change and they would want to come to work.
You sort of, Ward, you sort of touched on something that I really wanted to get into next. Sure. is recruitment. I see recruitment for police officers, recruitment for firemen. I very seldom see any large recruitment campaign for corrections officers. Why is that?
We don't take advantage of the media. We don't take advantage of radio or television where we could put out commercials to reach the millions of Georgians who might want to work in corrections. It's got its great benefits. It's got great challenges, and it's a decent employment. And so we've got to get the word out. they've been doing is they go to local colleges and they go to local job fairs, but that's not enough. You don't reach the people that you need. And so we've got to get on television. We've got to get on the radio in order to get the word out. And right now, our recruitment efforts have changed significantly. They've closed all the recruitment centers and they're leaving it up to the individual facility on top of everything else that they're responsible for, safety and security. And so tagging that on to the facility, the warden, is a burden. And so if I can create recruitment centers in every region, that would help the facilities focus on safety and security, and then put the recruitment on those who are professional from the human resources department. And again, using advertising is going to lure the people that you're looking for.
And that just requires a little political arm twisting from our government leaders. And I don't think that that's happening at all, because I hear conversations about conditions in our correctional facilities, but I don't hear any funding going into staffing, because if you don't have staffing that feels safe, staffing that is sufficient, then all the other things that you pour into the system are useless.
Everything is affected when you have lack of staff. Programming, educational programming, rehabilitation, trade program. Everything is affected because you don't have the staff to oversee it. And so the inmates don't get the programs that they need as part of their rehabilitation. Everything has to be supervised. And without that supervision, we cannot run educational programming or rehabilitative program or cognitive programming. Addressing the needs of the inmates, drug addiction, alcohol addiction. All of these programs are halted because we don't have enough staff to present them.
That is just amazing. I think that is like one of the greatest revelations that will come out of this conversation that we're having, is that you are not in the system provided the basic tool that you need. Now we know that there are, and we would like to speak to that, the actual living conditions in our correctional facilities, because I've heard recently some horror stories.
Well, I can tell you some firsthand.
Please feel free to share.
Okay. Excuse me. I was the warden at the special management unit. That facility has no budget. It depends on the mother unit, which is the Jackson Diagnostic State Prison in Jackson, Georgia. So I had to rely on their budget to get basic needs. For example, I would ask for mops and brooms. Now, mind you, the facility does not have inmates assigned to that facility to clean every morning. So I depended upon them giving me an outside detail that was certified to work at the facility, the high match. And so I had to literally beg for mops, brooms, mop buckets, chemicals. It was ridiculous. So I called my boss. I made them aware of the difficulties that I was having. Basically, I was treated like a stepchild. And the last warden that replaced me, he was removed from his position for simply asking for assistance in getting the basic needs to getting that facility clean. Now, mind you, they may not be the best inmates in corrections, but they do need to be treated with dignity and respect.
Sure.
And with the covert protocols, we had to clean 2 or 3 times a day in order to prevent covert. And so without mops and brooms, how are we expected to clean the facility when those tools were not being provided? That was a sad situation.
You know,
And, yeah.
I just wanted to add, and I'm really want to elicit some more information from you. But when I came up with the idea of having this program, I made a few statements on social media about it, and I joined I don't have the name of it, a particular website group of people involved in corrections.
Right.
And one of the name that came up that I should talk to was you. That came up that you would be a great resource. And I thought that was important because I also wanted to, and I don't want to call anyone's name out, but my goal today was to have someone in government and state government, a political leader, to be involved in this conversation, because what we're running into is we're having ideas coming down, but there's no communication with the people who need to implement these programs as to what you need. And what these leaders need to do is, yes, corrections reforms are needed, but before you implement those programs, you need to talk to people such as you, Warden Jose Morales, and even to some degree, some of the inmates also need to be spoken to. And I don't think that this is being done. We had one question from Facebook. When the systems that you're speaking about, are you referencing state prisons or private prisons or both?
Both. Okay,
that's good.
Yeah.
And also from Facebook, it seems to be it's easy. We have someone said it's easy to get burned out working in this system.
It is. It is.
I noticed, I did a little bit of reading, and I found out that retention is difficult because of that. I was reading somewhere where you had some recruits at one facility, I want to say it was the Ware State, where you had a new staff that left in a matter of weeks. I don't know whether it was because they were overwhelmed or just didn't get the support that they thought that they needed.
Ware State Prison is a closed security prison, and they had a riot several months ago. Where inmates were able to get out of their cells. Keys were not available to staff so that they would be able to at least escape from the mist of the storm, so to speak. And so they felt uncomfortable working at a facility where the inmates can be extremely dangerous. And they felt they were not given the support that they needed from the facility leadership, as well as some of the regional and up there in what we call Tiff College, the big house.
Okay.
Where the commissioner is. But Ware State Prison can be very dangerous.
I had one question that just popped into my head, and we have some more Facebook questions.
Yes.
But in your career as a warden at several facilities, were you ever called into a meeting of the legislature to discuss conditions at our correction facilities?
No. we were not allowed. That is something that the commissioner does along with the assistant commissioner. And although both of them had been wardens, they were wardens at facilities that had 600 inmates. They were medium security inmates. They always, follow rules for the most part. So they don't have that experience with these larger facilities and these close security facilities. One of the assistant commissioners came from probation, and he was in charge of the sex offenders by putting the ankle bracelets on them whenever they were getting out, and that's all he's done. Then, then he became a deputy warden at Rutledge to get some experience in the facilities, and then he was a care and treatment. He wasn't security, deputy warden of security. He was a deputy warden of care and treatment that delivers the programming. So he's responsible for ensuring that the inmate programming is being delivered and being delivered properly. And then he went to a Phillips State Prison, another small prison. He stood there for maybe a year or two, and with 4 to 5 years experience, he was promoted to assistant commissioner over wardens that had been there 12 years. So one of the issues in corrections is that we're promoting the wrong people. We're promoting people with little or no experience in the security side of the house, which ultimately runs the day-to-day operations. He did not have that experience. And now he's assistant commissioner, calling the shots. And so one of the things I want to change is putting the right people in the right positions. And nothing against deputy wardens of care and treatment, but the bottom line is they need to have that security background, that part of the system where you're dealing directly with gang members, gang leaders on a one-on-one basis in order to calm down certain activities within the facilities. Now, some wardens don't believe in giving them a voice, but I found it to work by speaking to these known gang leaders who have an influence on their members. Crips, Bloods, Gangster Disciples, Ghostface, Aryan Brotherhood. They're there. And if you ignore them, they can create an environment that is extremely violent, if you follow what I'm saying.
I follow you. And what you're saying to me sounds exactly like what we have going on in our correctional system is political grooming, where people with connections are groomed to move up in certain positions.
Oh, yes.
And they're put in a positions in supervisory positions where there is very small opportunity to fail. And what I'm saying, and if you get my drift on this, part of being a successful leader is being able to deal with crises and failures. Absolutely. And when you don't have that experience, then that makes you a less effective leader.
Yes.
But it makes you a, quote, leader, end quote, with a clean record, if you understand what I'm saying, without scars. And
all of our current close facilities have a warden over them that come from the care and treatment side of the facilities. And again, it's not that I want to put them down. They're
I understand.
hardworking, but without that security experience of running that operations daily, you have to have been a deputy warden of security, a lieutenant, a sergeant in security. You got to know how to run a shift. You have to have that experience. But if you came up as a counselor, program deliverer, and then you become a warden, you don't have that experience. You don't know how to deal with those crises involving gang members, involving violence. You understand what I'm saying?
Uh, Mr. Morales, I can see why you were suggested to us, and I'm so glad to have you.
And in all kinds of crises,
mhm.
from being a hostage negotiator, quelling a riot, actually, with their warden there. I was experienced in this type of an environment, and I was able to go in there with the tactical squad and speak to the inmates who some of them already knew me, and they knew how I operated. And I was able, along with my team members, to quell that riot without any further injuries or incidents. And this was at the largest state prison in the state of Georgia.
Wow. We have another question from our Facebook family.
Yep.
It's reference to the pay scale. And
Yes.
this may be, it's not a specific question, but it says, how many people get high salaries? And I guess that's all relative. And are taken from what people perceive as the operational budget. So how much of that goes to people on the ground, so to speak?
The majority of our budget, the correctional budget, is over $1 billion a year. Wow. And on the average, it takes about $17 million to run each facility every year. That includes feeding, clothing the inmates, providing staff with their pays. Now, the typical starting CO makes about $34,000 a year. Then after a year, they're giving a $3,000 pay raise. So they, after a year, they make $37,000. Your typical sergeant will make $42,000. Your lieutenant will make $45,000. Your deputy warden will make in the area of $50,000 to $55,000, depending on where you're a warden at, either a large facility or small. The smaller facilities, they'll make about $80,000 a year, and those that are wardens of larger facilities, they'll make $95,000 a year.
You know, that's pathetically low.
It is when you compare it to other states. Wardens are making $150,000, $160,000 a year, but Georgia, they look down upon corrections. They don't want taxpayers' money to go to criminals.
Correct.
But yet we have somewhere in the neighborhood of 50,000 offenders that have to be fed, clothed, programmed, supervised, and that costs a lot of money. And so the community has to understand that in order to run safe and secure facilities with the appropriate staff, it's going to cost. Because if they can go to Walmart or if they can go to Amazon warehouse and make 40,000, that's where they're going to go.
Correct.
And that's an issue when you are supervising, and this is typical all across the state. You have one officer assigned to monitor and supervise over 200 inmates. And then on some occasions, when all of the staff members don't come in, then that one officer is going to be responsible to run 2 or 3 buildings, dormitories, with 100 to 150 inmates in each dormitory. So that if you go to A dorm, you're not going to be visible in B and C. So B and C will do whatever they want. And mind you, corrections is 70% gang members, violent. Now, they too have to be treated with dignity and respect, but to be honest with you, those are the ones that are committing the homicides, the gang members.
Okay.
Inmates make a lot of money per year in criminal activity within the facilities. They're making a lot of money. One cell phone that you buy from Walmart, we call them throwaway phones. One of those phones is about $35, $40. You get one of those in a facility, and inmates, in order to communicate with their family members, get on Facebook, Twitter, whatever, they're willing to pay $800 to $1,000. So
goodness.
The dirty officer makes $400 off the phone, and then the rest goes to the gang members, gang leaders. And so that money is constantly coming in. Then from the phone, it goes into drugs. You can make 100 to 150,000 just conducting criminal activity inside the facility.
You see, and this goes back to, and you touched on something else that I really want to get into in a minute, but this goes back to paying professional people a professional salary.
Putting the right person in the right position, yes.
And the salary structure that you're speaking of sounds to me, and I believe me, I've had almost 30 years in law enforcement, sounds pathetically low. Pathetically low. I've during my police career, I had an opportunity to talk to several corrections officers, many of whom joined police departments. It's a tough job, but it's a job that's made tougher when you don't have the support. Now, what you're talking about, and I hear these politicians, I'm sorry to call you out, you're talking about prison conditions. I haven't heard any one of you talk about increasing the salaries or increasing the staffing. This is why I wanted Warden Jose Morales on this program, because this is information that needs to be put out there, that these people in policy-making positions need to hear, and their constituencies need to hear. Because you know what the bottom line is that these incarcerated people, most of whom who will be put back into society, will come out there and continue to victimize people if they aren't given the proper avenues for rehabilitations in our system. And you can't get that when you don't have the staff.
You can't run a daily operation in these prisons without staff. You just can't. And when you have a crisis like we have, where only 5, 6 out of 27 staff members coming to work, that's a major, major, major problem. Yeah. And when you don't do anything about it, you allow these facilities to operate with only 5, and then you wonder why you have such a high homicide rate or a high suicide rate. And let me tell you, in the last 10 years, we've had a significant amount of homicides and suicide.
Oh yeah.
And if they go by unchecked, or you don't put any effort or energy in fixing it, it's only going to continue and it's only going to get worse. And then the ones who suffer are those family members.
Yep.
Whom we want to ignore, because a lot of wardens, and I don't want to speak on behalf of other wardens, but I can tell you from my own experience that family members are seen as hindrances as opposed to being utilized in the efforts to rehabilitate their loved ones who are incarcerated. Now, before that inmate is released, they have to have some type of support on the outside. So if you start early on by providing family day, I was chastised by my superiors for having family days at my facility. They feel as if we're exposing too much of what we do. But it is important for those offenders to have connections with their loved ones in order for them to be helped succeed when they're back in the community. They need a place to stay. They need help finding jobs. They need support from family members. And if you keep them away, you're hindering the rehabilitation process. Whenever I had these family days, I would feed the family members who came. They acted respectfully. The inmates were always on their best behavior. I would put music and allow them to share a dance with their moms, share a dance with their wives, family members when they come to visit. And by allowing them that supervised freedom, they have a better outlook on who's managing them. They have a sense of respect for the staff members. And it's a win-win situation. I used to take 20, 30 minutes, gather around with the family members, and gave them a answer question opportunity. And they loved it. They had an opportunity to talk directly with the warden who is managing where their son is living. And I was able to answer the questions about dental situations, eye exams, medical conditions. I even showed them by a tour where their son is living and how clean it was and how safe it was. I talked to them about their daily programming activities, whether it be education, a trade, a cognitive counseling program, or whether it be addressing the addictive needs of the inmates. So they were so happy at the fact that they knew what was being taught to their family members. And just by answering their questions, they felt a sense of calmness, knowing that their family members are being cared for. Feeding them properly. I've been seeing the meals on Facebook as to what they've been receiving.
Yeah, I've seen them too.
They get a small portion of grits, a very small table-sized portion of eggs, and that's it. No bread, no other substance, no meat. And I plan on changing that. These inmates have a dietary guideline as to what they're supposed to be receiving for every meal each and every day. And I'm going to ensure by holding these wardens accountable to go down into those kitchens and dining halls and sit down and eat those meals that are coming out of your kitchen, your dining hall. And most of them, they don't even touch the food. I've had a meal every day during lunch, sometimes breakfast. I sit down at the same table with the offenders and talk to them, listen to their needs and their wants. Sometimes now I can't always give them what they want, but I will always give them what they need in order to survive inside the facility. And 3 square meals is the law. And by God, they're going to get those meals according to the dietary guidelines.
Well, Warden, it seems to me that you're talking about things that allow these incarcerated people to hold on to their dignity. And I think that is so important.
Yes. We have an aging population. We have inmates who are 90, 95 years old, and so they're elderly. They require assistance, just like anyone else who reaches their senior years. And to warehouse them in a dormitory that, they can't depend on their fellow incarcerated friends, because inside the facility, inmates won't do anything without being paid. That's just a fact.
Right.
If you want them to help you, you got to give them commissary. That's just the way it is. And some of them don't get support from their family members. Some have all, they died off or they've given up on them. And, we can train inmates to become CNAs. And that can carry out when they get out. They can go into the field of medical and they can become CNAs in our hospitals. So it's a win-win. We're taking care of the elderly and they're learning a trade. Win-win.
One of the questions that we have, another question that we have is the private, there's rumor out or word on the street, so to speak, that private systems, those private prisons, they collect funds per bed, whether they're filled or not. Is that true?
That is true. They're going to get paid regardless. It's in the contract. And it's not done by number of inmates. They go by the size of the facility. And we get a lot of pressure to provide some of our offenders to be transferred to these private facilities because, they in order for them to exist, they have to have or they have to house incarcerated individuals. And it's all about money. They're working under a contract. And, regardless, they're going to get their money.
So in order for the state to get the biggest bang for their buck, it's incumbent upon them to make sure that these facilities are as close to fully occupied as possible.
Correct.
Yeah, and you know how that can be taken out of context and mean something else.
Each bed is worth about $18,000 a year. And if it's a closed security or a mental health facility, it's $21,000 a year to manage them or house them. It is your estimated yearly cost.
You bring up another interesting point. Mental health in prisons. Can you break down, how much?
Okay. In 1990, the facility had about 1,800 mental health inmates. When the state closed the mental health hospitals throughout the state as a form of budget cuts, then our mental health population has risen to 9,000 in the last 20, 30 years. because we at one time we had what we used to call insane asylums and mental health hospitals. That's a thing of the past. Now, prisons have adopted the mental health population. So now they're being, whenever they commit a crime, they're being sentenced. And it's a requirement that we provide them with mental health treatment. And being that the population has increased so much, we've had to take more facilities to take on these mental health inmates. And along with them, you have to have psychologists, psychiatrists, mental health mental health staff to address their needs. And so this population seems to be increasing and not decreasing.
That is scary. That is scary, because we've had, and I can go back to Mr. David Furliger. I'll call out his name because he was the one who started this closing down. He was a Philadelphia lawyer, my own city, and he was responsible for changing a lot of the mental health practices throughout the country. We're talking about what we call the insane asylums. In Philadelphia, we had Byberry. There were other facilities that are infamous throughout the country that housed people with who had mental challenges. Sadly, they made it appear as though these people were being taken care of by community-based organizations. But now, through this revelations that our government leaders refuse to listen to, you're informing us that these people are now still being cared for by the state, but by facilities that are ill-equipped to take care of them. And that's our corrections department.
Yeah. Now, depending on the level of mental challenges that they have, will require more staff. Now, we have a level 1 person is someone without a diagnosed mental illness. A level 2 mentally challenged individual requires medication and counseling, but can function in normal society under the medication and the one-on-one counseling treatment. Then you have your level 3. Now, these individuals have a diagnosed mental challenge, mental illness, and so they have to be housed separately. They can function, but they have to be supervised. They're unpredictable. They have a low IQ. They won't be able to function with normal population. They have to be supervised. Then you have those that have a mental health crisis, and those will go to a level 4. A level 4, they're separated from your normal population. You're sometimes under the care of a mental health professional, be it a psychiatrist, psychologist. You're on heavy medication that sometimes make them a zombie. They're heavily medicated, and there's many reasons for that. But when you have someone on heavy doses of psychotropic medication, they don't act like they normally would. They're under the influence. And so again, they become hostile sometimes. They become very needy. Sometimes they get so violent that we have to restrain them to the bed for their safety as well as the safety of others. But they still need adequate care, just as any other inmate. And then you have your level 5, And these are those that are hospitalized. They have severe mental illness. For an example, they feel like they're God. They feel like they're the president of the United States. They're very delusional. And again, it requires staff to overwatch them, to make sure that they're not trying to harm themselves and or others. This is where we receive a lot of suicides with this population.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, and you're asked to manage this and you had being paid a rewarding salary of about $90,000 a year.
Yeah.
That's just horrific. One thing we talked on, and I just want to mention this for our listening audience. There were 26 homicides in 2020 in the Georgia prison system. This year, this is as of this was dated September 21st, I believe. This year we already have 18.
Mm-hmm.
By June of 2020, 19 inmates had committed suicide in Georgia prisons, and that's twice the national average. And you might also like to know that the I'll read this. This is from a particular website. The title is Reports of Violence and Deplorable Conditions in Georgia Prison Systems Prompt Department of Justice Investigation, dated September 20th, 2021. The U.S. Department of Justice announced an investigation into the Georgia prison systems in the wake of allegations of unconstitutional abuses of inmates. According to Kristen Clark, head of the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division, the dangerous conditions in the Georgia prison system include gang activity, contraband, severe staffing shortages, and a lack of accountability for misconduct.
Yes.
There is a special concern over the treatment of the LGBTQ inmates by staff members and other inmates, including widespread sexual abuse. And I go back to something that we talked about, that all of this can be looked upon by the lack of staffing.
Yes, that's one of the major issues, is the lack of staffing. But we still have to run a safe and secure facilities.
Correct.
You have to take a proactive approach. I, as a warden, I had to take it upon myself, knowing that I was short-staffed. What am I going to do about it? So I had my deputy warden of security go to the Department of Labor and speak with them and talk to those individuals who meet the criteria to become a correctional officer and get them on board. And you do that by being visible, by being a go-getter, so to speak. And so I would go to military bases with my experience, and I would talk to those who were at their end of their military career. And I was able to get some of the ex-soldiers to become correctional officers. And they make some of the best correctional officers. You know, they have the leadership skills, the communication skills. You know, they have the baseline to become a great officer. And again, we've got to advertise. Why not advertise? It's going to cost money, but there are some radio stations that would do it for free, being where state, and they would do it. I had one or two stations here in Savannah that would help me with a 30-second commercial on, you know, we need correctional officers, we need nurses, we need food service workers, we need mechanics. You know, all areas of corrections is short. And to be brutally honest, it is one of the major causes for the increase in homicides and suicides because of the lack of supervision. When an unsupervised inmate are the ones that will commit the crimes because they're free to do so. There's nobody looking, there's nobody watching, there's nobody supervising. And one officer cannot manage 3 dormitories at once. They have to go make checks in A dorm. They have to go to B dorm. They have to go to C. So while they're in C, B and A are doing whatever they want, so to speak. So you have to address staff shortage. That has to be a number one priority.
And I think that one issue that affects is your not only your homicide rate but your suicide rate. And I say that because if the people who are in charge can't protect me, then I have to protect myself.
That's exactly what it is. Yes. So
and
they're more likely to make a weapon out of any material inside a facility. Metal, plastic, even paper, when wadded up, like a magazine. They can make a weapon out of a magazine, a club. And what we're finding when we do contraband searches, we found an increase in shanks.
Wow.
And other weapons, because they feel if you can't defend me, protect me, I'm going to have to do it myself. So,
yeah, Warden Morales, I just want to, because we only have a couple of minutes left in our program, but
yes.
we do have a Facebook comment that I think you should be aware of.
Okay.
And that comment is that you are a good warden because you have a good heart. That's,
behind that.
Go ahead.
Okay. My brother, Michael, he was incarcerated for over 30 years in the New Jersey prison system. And I sent him money. I would call the warden to make sure he's being treated fairly. He would complain to me about meals and medical and dental. And so I understand where family members are coming from. My daughter is gay, and she's married to a woman. Okay. At first, I didn't know how to react, but after I got to know my daughter's wife, I was open to it. And so whenever I have a member from the LGBTI, I listen to them. And you can ask them, like the one that filed the lawsuit and brought all this to light. Mm-hmm. She will tell you that I treated her with dignity and respect, and I would listen to her. She never sued me.
Wow.
And that's what we have to do. We have to, all of these different type of people need to be heard. They must be respected for who they are.
So, well, Warden, I thank you so very, very much for being a part of this program. I thoroughly think it was informative. I am certain that some government leaders will be listening to this program. And I hope at some point that they will personally reach out to you for your expertise.
Well, I'm hoping.
What I would like to say is that at some point in the very near future, I would like to reach back out to you so that we can continue this discussion with other people who have the same interest, because I think that it is important, because once again, this makes what we're talking about things that makes us better, our society better. We're not talking about just people in prison. We're talking about people that make our society better. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to thank you for joining us here on WCEG Network. This has been Issues and Answers. We have been talking about prison corrections. We will see you soon. Take care.